Roop looks very confident at this point. Dibiase has sustained an unbelievable amount of pressure. This match it's all on the line right here for Ted Dibiase. It's all on the line right here. And Roop has got the whole of the figure four locked in. Dibiase may be unconscious. Dibiase's out. The referee has stopped the match. The referee's decision goes to Bob Roop. And right here in Mid-South, boy, we've got a new North American champion.
Welcome back to another edition of the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop, and I'm your co-host, Ray Russell here, just joining you guys for all the fun as we head back for the third week in a row to the Cowboy, Bill Watts' Mid-South wrestling territory, going back to the year of 1982 in the thick of things now, and here to tell us all about it, welcome back to the show, his show, welcome back, Bob Roop.
Hey, Ray.
What's
that is good to be back, isn't it?
Yeah, it's always great to be here, right? We're here for another week on this earth, if you will.
Well, you know, my two sons and I own a home together, two of my three sons. They've heard all my stories, ad nauseum. So, once in a while we'll go somewhere and they're trapped in the vehicle with me, so they're captive audience, and I'll trot out my stories again for the 15th time. So they don't want to hear it. So it's nice, when you and I get together, I know I've got at least one listener. I assume that you're interested. Apparently, from the feedback we got on the Mid-South episode, in terms of 1,500 people liking it, we've got some listeners out there too. So knowing that, it's nice to get back together with you. We're basically talking about, now you're a historian in a way, but we're talking about my life, and from years and years and years ago. What better thing is there for an old timer to be able to share himself with people who, through the venue of pro wrestling, has some interest in you. So anyway, I just elaborate on why it's good to be back.
Oh yeah, it's always great to do another show here on the Wrestling Stoop with you. We never know what we're going to get into. We kind of have a loose format every week, but we never know the stories you're going to pull out, and they're always fun. That's for sure. Never a dull moment, whether it's Bob Orton or Paul Orndorff or whatever we come into this week here on the show.
Let me ask you something. I noticed on, I think it was on Facebook, you have a new attraction. What was it? Nostalgia? You have a new on
Wrestling
Russell?
Nostalgia with Dave Dynasty. Yeah, he's had that show for quite a while, a few years now, and he's joined the WrestleCopia brand.
When was that happen in the last month or so?
Just in the last week, actually.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, good to have him part of the show.
Oh man, you got a good thing going, Ray. I'm telling you, I'm proud. I'm happy, and I'm thrilled. I'm grateful to be part of it, my friend.
Yeah. Any way we can expand, reliving professional wrestling history. Just trying to preserve memories, like here on the Wrestling Stoop. That's basically my goal, and it doesn't have to always be the 60s or 70s or 80s. It can be any era, and obviously we just opened up another program in the last month as well, the Pro Wrestling Academy. I have a Japanese wrestling historian, and we've kind of been documenting that from the beginning, the origins of professional wrestling in Japan. So that's been fun too. I've learned a lot in a short time. So we're just getting started there.
Yeah, the other day I just happened to be going through the channels, and I saw you can watch wrestling from Japan on American TV, and it's good. It's pretty interesting stuff. So yeah, I'm happy to be a part of.
We're certainly happy to have you, Bob.
Bigger organization, but I'm glad to be a part of it. I don't know how you do it.
I don't know how I do it either, and sometimes my wife really doesn't know how I do it, so I hear it from her. That's why I'm taking you out for ice cream today, honey, so she'll be happy with that. And
tell her I really appreciate her. Her sharing you with me. I'm really happy about that.
Oh, very cool. Very cool stuff. Man, we've had already 2 episodes of you in the Mid-South territory. You come in, again, we'll talk about it on your birthday, July 22nd, 1981. We fast forward now, we're all the way up to February of 1982, but you come in a relative unknown, a baby face, and you score a win in your very first match on TV over the Super Destroyer, and you win the Louisiana title. Shortly thereafter, you're partnered with top babyface Ted Dibiase, the brand new tag team, looking for the tag team gold, but instead it's all done to turn you heel on DiBiase to make you a very credible top level heel at that. And now you've become a challenger for DiBiase's North American title. Now, Bob, the trouble is your bestie, your BFF, Paul Orndorff, also gunning for the North American title. And the problem is it's not a tag team belt, guys. It's only
right.
One title, one champion, Bob. So we'll have to see how that plays out as we continue on here in the story of Bob Roop in the Mid-South Wrestling territory.
Well, that Paul, it's seniority. I think I was about 40 years old at the time. And
I'm due, Paul.
Paul's only about maybe early 30s at the most. He's got to wait his turn. It's my turn.
When your body looks that good, like Paul Orndorff, you don't need a belt. Hey, man, I need everything I can get. It's like, Paul, you just go over there and flex those guns for the ladies, right?
Well, he was. He had a great body, but he was cut.
Oh, yeah.
He wasn't a big, thick guy. He was muscular, but he was cut. Plus, he was handsome. He had a nice head of hair, attractive, handsome face, very masculine looking, and hairy chest and all that kind of thing. But so yeah, he was a whole package. And I'll tell you, it compensated for, I was making the comment I made to you before we went on the air, not from lack of ability, just some lack of experience. His work wasn't sophisticated yet. Some of the things he was doing were still kind of, I don't want to say rookie, but were early career type stuff that you just wouldn't do after you had a chance to watch yourself on TV. But after watching yourself enough times, and again, I'll go back to Johnny Valentine, when asked about how he got his style, the one that he ended up that was so overwhelmingly got him over so strong and for a long time in a territory was he watched TV, he watched himself on TV, and the stuff that he saw that didn't look real or in any way detracted from what he was trying to convey, he quit doing it. And that's what I meant when I talked about when Paul got more sophisticated. In fact, later on in his career, like by the time they got up into New York, he had eliminated a lot of that stuff that I saw in Mid-South.
Right.
So, but he drew money. He drew money. So what can you say? You can't.
The Cowboys got plenty of top talent right now. That's for sure that you're working around. We had a story you told, it's been several episodes ago, maybe a dozen or more episodes ago, and we're going to touch on that again here in a few minutes because it's about to actually happen in real time, 1982, Bob. And that involves you, the Junkyard Dog. Well, indirectly, I guess, JYD wasn't really actually involved, but he is part of the story. And Paul Orndorff, and a little conversation up there in the Cowboys' nest. But we're not going to get right to the conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about the first match in the situation. As last week we closed up with the first week of February in 1982. This week we head off to the second week of February TV, and it's the Louisiana champion. Hey, you used to have that belt, didn't you? It's now owned by the Junkyard Dog, JYD, coming to the ring, Louisiana champion, taking on Bob Roop.
Yeah, I was watching some of these matches this last week. I hadn't done my homework the last time we got together, at least not enough of it. So I hadn't seen some of the matches, but I was watching, and so I looked at, I think, 4 different matches with the Dog. One of them with Gordon Soley doing the commentary. I don't even know where that was at. And one thing that in every match, he beat me. He beat me right in the middle of the ring.
Imagine that.
And not only beat me, but I'm watching things that I was surprised. Again, I never watched this on TV. I hadn't seen this stuff before. Never. So I'm watching, and after he beat me, they kept the camera on the ring. I just laid there. He did that power slam for his finish. He's a great big guy, and I'm a big guy. And so you got like 500, 600 pounds hitting the mat. with being underneath, being the meat in the sandwich,
Right.
The ham in the sandwich. I just laid there. Camera's still on the ring. A lot of times the guys would get beat, and because like heels wanted to keep their heat, they would jump up. They get 1, 2, 3, and then within 5-10 seconds they would be on their way getting back up. Even if they got over the ropes, they wanted to get back up on their feet.
I think we might see that here before we're done with this episode, by the way, but I'll let you continue.
Well, I just laid there, and I'm saying this to make a point. I just laid there, and the heels very seldom do that, unless I don't know. Bill gave me instructions to do that. Certainly after, with Dibiase, he used his power slam, and then he gave me a shoulder breaker. You definitely want to lay there. So I watched 7 matches, and I think 5 of them I got beat right in the middle of the ring. The other 2 I won, or I went over, but I won. I got put over. The 5 I lost, I laid there afterwards, like I might have rolled over onto my stomach, but I just laid there kind of twitching and not like out, but like I couldn't get up. And I look at that, I thought, man, I don't remember doing that. Why would I do that? Because it's like you're just totally beat here. And then it came back to me that I knew that Bill was going to do something, that he wasn't going to have me going on that basis. By the time I got into a house show of anybody who had seen me get beat like this, I was going to do something somewhere on TV that was going to get my heat back. But you know what? It got the Junkyard Dog over, and he was our cash cow.
Right.
He was the head of, I shouldn't say cow, he was our head steer and our bull. And he was drawn. And the other thing is, too, I liked him. And I was happy to put him over because that was my job. If you get a guy over, you're doing your job and you're always going to be able to get work. We'll get into it with Paul, with Orndorff. But he thought that, by getting beat, he was diminishing himself.
Right. Yeah, we definitely got that one coming.
Well, we'll get to it. Okay.
Yeah, we'll get to it very shortly, actually.
All right. Let me hand it back to you.
Sure.
I'm bringing myself back on the path, okay?
That's all right. That's cool. Yeah, no, well, we're kind of talking about the dog anyway. You're in the ring with him here, and it's one of the matches perhaps you saw. I'm not sure, but this is another fun one. Lots of what I wrote in my notes, awesome spots here because it's convoluted booking by the Cowboy. A big finish here. Going to see Paul Orndorff come out and run up on the apron, but he accidentally hits you, Bob, not the dog, and you kind of pivot around and stumble right into the big old thump, the big power slam from JYD. And then Orndorff says, man, I got to do something about this. So he goes up top. He goes to the top rope, but instead of jumping off, Dog catches him, picks him up, presses him over his head, and out comes Bobby Orton. He's going to save the day now for you, Bob. Nope. Dog presses Orndorff out of the ring on top of Bobby Orton after he throws him on you, by the way. So Paul Orndorff playing the ping pong ball here for the JYD. And after all of this, after Orndorff's interference and wrestling you for several minutes and Bob Orton trying to get involved, after all of this, the Dog, he decks you again just as you're getting to your feet, and he makes the 1, 2, 3. He takes everybody out, and the crowd goes absolutely nuts as I ask everyone, who dat? Who dat? Who dat say they gonna beat that Dog? Not Bob Roop.
No, or Bob Orton Jr. or Paul Orndorff. Not those 3 guys. Yeah.
But that was just fun to watch, man. You gotta smile at something like that. It was good times.
Well, it was. And you know what? And the reaction from the audience, it tells you. Because a lot of those folks are regulars, and they've seen it all. And they've seen it for a while. So if you got them hopping up and down because you surprised them, they didn't expect what happened.
Right.
Even if they did, they were really thrilled when it did happen. You've done something good. So I talked a minute ago about being laying there. Well, I was laying there. I wasn't really hurt, of course, but I was laying there, and I was feeling a great deal of satisfaction because the audience, we accomplished what we were trying to accomplish. My job was to make him stronger after he worked with me than he was before he worked with me, and I managed to accomplish that every time. Sometimes, you just break even, and that might be if you've got a guy who, you can't work that well together. Maybe it's first time you work together or whatever, where you have to kind of be making, you're covering up mistakes or whatever. But with Dog, you could keep it real simple. Boy, if you got him over, all you had to do is you go to New Orleans, and a building on there, big building down there full of people. About 9 out of every 10 of them were there to see him. Right. And the rest of us were window dressing. So, well, I don't have a problem saying that.
No, man.
You know why?
He's a once in a lifetime, once in a generation anyway. Talent was JYD. His overness, his charisma.
Well, when I first met him, he came. I'm just going to go back. This is just for an example. When he came through Knoxville, and I put him on TV and made him $25, he never forgot that. But the reason I'm talking about that, when he came through there, he was at the bottom. He had already worked for a while, but he was going out to Louisiana or Mid-South for a second. But he had already been there, I guess. I overheard Watts talking about him having been there a year or two before. And not being, he wasn't a Dog, of course, yet. Right. And then the guy that when I got out to Mid-South, after Dog made it, the guy I was talking to was the same guy that I talked to in Knoxville when he was coming through. Down to earth guy who wasn't, just because he became a major player, didn't change him. When he got out of the ring, he was back to being Sylvester Ritter. He wasn't the Junkyard Dog.
Right.
And some of the guys couldn't leave their personas behind.
We may run into one of those guys here very shortly.
Yeah, we probably will. You know me. I never let go. Well, there's a lot to talk about with some people,
Yeah. Oh, there certainly has to be. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
So you do the job. Everybody does the job to the Dog here this week on TV. And the following week, to get a little bit of heat back, you're just putting a squash match. You go over Rick Ferreira. We kind of mentioned him on the last episode. You do the old shoulder breaker deal to score the win. So a decisive win. You needed that after coming off a loss. It wasn't against a big name, so to speak, but it was definitive. You hit your finisher. You remind everybody, this is Bob Roop, and this is what I do.
Right. And then, and I also watched a couple of interviews, and I think those were effective too, the way they did it. You had just me talking. There wasn't, I had the microphone but it was just me on the screen. And to me, that was very effective because there's no distractions. You're just watching one thing. You're watching the guy who's talking. And the interviews weren't the best I've ever made, but they were okay. I got over the points I was trying to make, which was the points that Bill asked me to get over, of course, talking about upcoming matches. One thing that anybody that would be interested, any wrestling aficionados out there who have a lot of experience, I think Mid-South is the only place I ever worked, including when I was Booker, that you had heels and baby faces getting beat right in the middle of the ring on every wrestling, just about every show. There'd be at least one or two of them would get beat right on TV. You shouldn't see that.
Right.
Some of these matches against Dog, he would beat all of us. It would beat Dibiase, would beat Bob Orton Jr., would beat me, all in one match. Because, again, we talked about this earlier. Bill knew how to get the heat back on us by doing something later in the show, or where the tape was going with the bicycle, we were going to be able to go to the next show in some towns where they wouldn't have seen the TV yet. So our heat wouldn't have been in any way taken away from us.
Right.
So Bill was on top of that, and I never even thought about that until you and I started discussing Mid-South, Ray. I never thought about how he did it. But again, he had all the time in the world to think about it. You talk about a cash cow. His promotion was a whole herd of cows and the cattle, and he was a head bull, I think. But
yeah, I think he would tell you that too.
Well,
he would remind you guys of that. I would imagine. I could see it now. Nowadays they have those team meetings, if you will, where they pull everybody in and talk to everybody. I could see if that was a thing back in this era. The cowboy calling up a meeting just to remind everybody who the true bull of the woods was, if you will.
Well, we haven't gone there yet. We could, we probably will, but not too long after that, by the time Watts came in a few years later, where he took over running, his company was defunct, wasn't it?
Oh yeah,
I mean,
he sold it to Crockett several years earlier, about 5 years earlier.
You don't know what the selling price was, do you?
It was a few million, but Crockett never paid all of it off because Crockett sold to Turner, and Watts never got all the money, I don't believe.
I didn't realize he sold it. I didn't know that. I know that when McMahon came along, there was a new bull in the china shop, or a new guy in town.
Sure.
And by that time, having national television available, it was a whole different ball game. You guys were known nationally, and if you came in there and you worked in Watts territory and you promoted against him, you had guys that had a whole bunch of guys that were stars. Think about when Hogan and you had Piper's Pit against him, a bunch of heels and baby faces, and with that kind of a New York, I think it had a lot of stature compared to some of the smaller territories that was coming out of the East Coast, Madison Square Garden, that kind of thing. Well, you got somebody to come in that was going to promote against you, that you don't, all of a sudden you aren't the only bull in the pasture anymore. But boy, when I was there, he sure was. And I didn't grow up on a farm, but I sounded like it. He made hay while the sun shined. So my hat's off to him. Where were we?
You were getting a win over Rick Ferreira, and then we follow that up the next week, and this is where it gets interesting. On color commentary, very special guest this week alongside Boyd Pierce is the American Dream, baby, Dusty Rhodes coming to town. Talking to you in public, live and in living color, if you will. So while Dusty's on commentary here, he's talking with Boyd, a guy by the name of Bob Roop, you may know him. He stops over.
Oh, good guy, yeah.
Okay, well, a lot of people disagree, Bob. I heard he tried to steal a couple territories or something.
Well, I don't blame him.
Anywho, this Bob Roop guy, he walks over to Boyd. He interrupts Dusty. How dare you interrupt the Dream, by the way? But he interrupts Dusty and Boyd Pierce, their conversation there. And as Bob Roop says last week, you stuck me in the ring with Rick Ferreira. And he's tough, but he's not in my class. Now this week, you want me to wrestle Bill Ash. And he's tough too, but he's also not in my class. So we're gonna get going here with the fun little story, the angle that follows. But I love how you put the guys over. They're tough. You didn't just say they're nobodies. They're trash. You didn't bury them. They're tough, but they're no Bob Roop, because you got to make these guys look credible too.
Of course. Well, why would you? What? It's like if you're going to go in there and I talked about wrestling Mike Jackson three times in a year on TV. If you're you got to figure out some way to make the guy you're against somehow to where when you beat him, you beat somebody. Otherwise, you should just segue here for a second. When I went into Carolinas the first time, they put me in the ring. I think Weaver and Becker were booking. I think it was still George Becker and Weaver, but I know Johnny Weaver was the one that called well, when I went around these towns, they put me with guys, and I'm not trying to knock anybody here, but they put me with guys like one guy was named Johnny Heidemann, who was kind of an office guy, young around the office. He'd been there for years, and he was basically a jobber, and admitted to that, because in every one of those buildings, he'd been getting beat for 10 years. I don't know if they ever had him win a match there. I doubt if he ever won a match on TV. So I'm coming in there, this Olympian guy who's going to come in the territory. You got some, it's a big territory. You got some top guys there. The Andersons are there, and Thunderbolt Patterson is getting over. The Kangaroos are there. They got all kinds of top guys there. And I'm trying to get over, and they put me against someone like Johnny Heidemann. I might have mentioned this on an earlier program, but I'll repeat it. Well, we tie up, and the first of all, his head comes up to about the top of my lower lip. Probably weighs 50 pounds less than I do, and he's balding. He's at least 15 years older. And we get in the ring, and we get in the ropes, and he hits me with a gut shot and steps back. He's just a little short shot, and he steps back. Well, if I'd have been a great worker, and I'm new, I'm still pretty green. I didn't know what to do I couldn't think of anything I could do without killing myself, except one thing. I went right out, I snatched him, I picked him up, gave him a shoulder breaker, and beat him. So the match went about 25 seconds or 30 seconds. It's supposed to go 7 minutes. I got back there and I did that. I did that every time I went around and got over. If that's the way if I was somebody like that, and they had a bunch of guys. Don't get me wrong. I give them all the credit in the world. They kept the job all those years for whatever they had to do it. But as little as I did know, I knew that I had the ignominy of, the shame of getting out of the ring and having people, going, "Oh, you stink," You need to go back to amateur wrestling, if you were even any good at that. I knew that shame already, so I didn't want to do that anymore. So the only thing I knew how to do or what to do. So I was ready to do that. And guys like Thunderbolt and Jerry Briscoe, who was Jerry was already helping out with the towns and getting himself into a kind of a management position. He was very ambitious early on, to his credit, because he made a career out of it for like 50 years. So, but both of those guys, because we were personal friends, both those guys told me on the QT, on the side, said, "You're getting over, Bob. That's the right thing to do," because nobody expected it. So I don't know where did I go? Would even start to start?
We were talking about some of the underneath guys, the enhancement guys, and how you're verbally putting them over, but at the same time putting yourself over. It's like, Rick Ferreira, Bill Ash, they're tough guys, but they're in no class near me, not Mr. Bob Roop. You say, meanwhile, you got guys like the Junkyard Dog running around here with the Louisiana title, Ted Dibiase running around here with the North American title, and hey, who's this sitting here? A former NWA world champion, Dusty Rhodes, just sitting in a chair, not even dressed to wrestle? What's going on here? You're basically putting down all the champions, even though you just wrestled Dog a couple weeks ago, but we're going to forget about all of that because it's a heel telling the story, and that's just how things work.
Yes, exactly.
So you run down Dusty Rhodes and company, and you begin to walk away. You head towards the ring. You're going to wrestle this match with Bill Ash, whether you want to or not. But as you start to head towards the ring, Dusty Rhodes on commentary says he's pretty sure he just saw the Dog beat Bob Roop 2 weeks ago right here on TV. Oh, that's all Bob Roop needed to hear. Roop turns around, walks back over to the table and says, "What did you just say?" So you get into it here, a verbal jousting with the American Dream as you coax Dusty out of his seat, out of his announcer seat, which was a huge no-no in Mid-South. Bill Watts made it clear time and time again that once you're an announcer for the week, you cannot get involved physically. No altercations. You could be fined. You could be suspended. Lots of things can happen to you. But Dusty Rhodes doesn't care because he's heard enough from one Bob Roop. So Dusty out of his seat, and you coax him to come after you. And here he comes, Dusty Rhodes, doing a little job, baby, walking towards Bob Roop. But it's Paul Orndorff attacking Dusty from behind. And then it's a two-on-one beatdown. But Roop, you accidentally land your high knee into the chin of Paul Orndorff, and that's a mighty fine chin, I may say. But
I should have ducked.
So that high knee levels your own buddy, Paul Orndorff here, which allows Dusty to take over. This is all going on in the concrete, by the way, guys. Dusty Rhodes planting bionic elbows all around on both men, and he even drops the big elbow on Paul Orndorff on the floor. I had to laugh just to prove I could, baby. I had to get it done. And Dusty, and the best part is yet to come because Dusty dropping his elbow on the concrete on Paul, and there's no referee because it's not a match. So what does Dust do? Well, he's going to make that count. You can better believe Dusty Rhodes counts 1, 2, 3 just to let everybody know that he can beat Paul Orndorff. And that wasn't in the script, so to speak. So I can only imagine how pissed off Orndorff was because after taking Dusty's finisher on the concrete, Bob, Paul literally jumps up and immediately no-sells the entire thing as you guys do a 2-on-1 beatdown following thereafter. And I just had to get a laugh out of all of that because if you know what you're looking at, you realize what's happening here.
I got to go back. I saw it earlier. I got to go back and look at that because that, again, I talked about Paul not being sophisticated yet. Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah. Well, I saw another one myself, that match where I got hung up in the ropes by my foot.
Yeah, I remember that match.
I was selling the hell out of it outside on the floor, but by the time, who was it, Dog? But yeah, the time Dog got me back match, got me back inside, he was pushing me around. I wasn't limping. Now, if I'd had time to get it across to the fans that I was faking on the floor, that my ankle really wasn't hurt, I was just pretending like it was. But when Dog got me in the ring, I wasn't limping. I wasn't favoring that leg. So in a way, I was doing kind of what Paul was doing and not selling something I've been selling like like it was a injury level. It was like a 10 5 seconds ago. Now I'm in the ring. It's down to a 2. I looked at that and I was critical of that on my own work. But Paul shouldn't have jumped up from getting the bionic elbow. And
well, I mean, by all accounts, Paul's always been referred to as a hothead. And I watched Dusty do. First thing I did was I watched it, right? So I'm looking at it as a fan initially, and I'm like, wow, Paul, like you're saying right here, you shouldn't just get up from Dusty's finisher on a concrete, no less, or even if it's just an elbow on the concrete, period. And Paul jumps up like it never happened. But I really feel going back and watching it that Paul did that probably because Dusty pinned him. It just felt like that probably was like, all right, you asshole.
Well, that's a good lead into the story we're going to get into, the second version of it. Paul didn't like to get beat, and he shouldn't have been a heel. If you don't like to get beat, you definitely don't want to be a heel, because your job as a heel is to get beat, and to get beat in the way, whatever way it takes. If it's having a midget wrestler or a little person make you give up on the handshake, you got to figure out some way to do it. And you say, well, could you possibly do that? Well, if right before the handshake, if Andre the Giant stomped on your hand about 7 times, and then a little person grabbed it, you'd give up on a handshake, wouldn't you? There's a way to do anything, but Paul really didn't like to get beat. And again, if you're going to be a heel, you got to say, that's my job. I did a show, I might have mentioned this one before, but the heels didn't show up. I was the only heel there. All the baby faces were there. I worked the first 4 matches.
Wow.
I think I told this one where I didn't change my boots or my tights or I had that colored singlet. But for the second and fourth matches, I wore a mask and claimed to be somebody else. It was a spot show. It was a little bitty Saturday night town.
Yeah.
A few hundred people there. And I was just having fun with it. I mean, I was shocked there were no heels there. I had fun with it, pretending to be coming out there and saying, no, I'm not Bob Roop. I borrowed his equipment. I'm Mr. X or whoever. Yeah, I worked 4 matches. I got beaten all of them and then worked the main event. So that's our job. And the way I got away with it. Now, if I'd have gone out there 4 times and won 3 of those matches and pissed, to win a little spot show, you want to leave people in a spot show. You want to make them really happy. That way, the next time you come back there, maybe 6 months or whatever down the line, they'll come again. And at a house show, you don't mind if people, where you go every week, you don't mind if people leave a little pissed off or even a lot pissed off. Where you have to, if you're a heel, you have to wait till everybody leaves before you even try to leave the building. Or either that or make sure you got a police escort out of town. If you want that kind of heat, so they'll come back next week to see you get your just desserts, to get the payback. That's one thing. But in a spot show, you don't want to do that because, you want to make them happy. And the next time they said, oh, yeah, the wrestling's back. Hey, we had such a good time last time. Let's go again. So it was easy. It was a lot less pressure. Again, if it had been like this was in Tennessee, if I had been in Florida and I'd been at Miami, of course I wouldn't have done that. I don't know what we'd have done. Well, we would have stalled as long as we could to give the heels a chance to get there. That one time,
figured something out. Ain't gonna give the money back. We talked about that before.
Oh yeah. Well, not Buddy Fuller, but Lester Watts getting the heels to San Juan, Puerto Rico at 10:40 at night. The show started at 8:30.
Yeah.
And we didn't get into the building until 10:40. We didn't give the money back. We went ahead and had the show. We're still wrestling at 1 o'clock. Yeah, you don't give the money back.
Right.
That's a no.
This was a fun segment. Dusty just happened to be in town, so they figured, hey, why not? Let's run an angle on TV. He gets the best of both of you guys at first, and then the numbers game catches up. You beat Dusty down, leave him laying. Poor old Bill Ash comes out just to talk sense into you, because Bill Ash is typically he's an enhancement guy, but he's usually the heel enhancement guy. But here he's just coming out. He's like, hey, Bob, you guys have done enough. And how dare he tell you what to do, right? We've already seen what happened with Jimmy Garvin and some of these other guys. So you scoop poor Bill up and give him a shoulder breaker on the concrete. So he's down and out. We later learned from at least Boyd Pierce, it may have been the Cowboy coming on here, but somebody announces that Dusty was fined $2,500 for leaving the announce desk. So he did this to himself. This is very reminiscent of Kevin Sullivan in San Francisco, right? Like Kevin did it to himself. Poor guy was already, getting his father beat up and everything. And then he gets fined, and here Dusty gets fined for basically accepting the challenge that you laid out. It was all a plot, all a ploy so that Orndorff could jump in. And it really just, it's done basically to get Dusty on your TV program, but also it's done because Paul's going to work Dusty just in a handful of house show matches upcoming over the next couple weeks. And that's pretty much the gist of this week's television in Mid-South. But
let me insert.
Sure.
I got a story. I had a click when we were talking about Dusty. Mm-hmm. I have a memory of being with Dusty Rhodes by myself alone. We were in a parking garage, and I couldn't figure out where it was. Thinking about it, it had to be out here in Mid-South. I don't know why. I'm not sure why we were there, but it was just me and him. And here's what's different. With just me and him, Ray, do a little Dusty for me with the talk.
What's going on, Bobby Roop, baby?
Yeah, there you go. When we were alone, he didn't do that. He didn't do that at all. Yeah, it was. He didn't. I mean, his friends didn't call him Virgil. I don't think. I don't remember if Murdoch called him Verge or not when they were partners. I'm not. He might have. But anyway, but when we were talking, I think he realized that first of all, I never put the character over. If a guy was doing his shtick, what am I supposed to applaud in the dressing room? I just would kind of ignore him, but. Or look at him like, okay, oh, why don't you save it for TV or the ring or whatever? But when we were together, I thought about it over the years. I thought, that was so different because it was the same Dusty that in the dressing room in Jacksonville, where he came in. I'd done a blade job for him. I'm, trying to see if I need stitches or not, and he asked about the house, and I told him that. It was a great house, but it was a little less than the 2-ring battle royal with Andre the Giant the week before. We were down a little bit. He told me there was no hey baby stuff when he said, well, I'm in the big leagues now, and if you can't measure up, I'll get somebody else. That was the real Dust. That was the person. It wasn't the persona. It was the person behind the persona. And that was the guy I saw in Louisiana. And this is years later, and so I'm thinking about that. When I think about it now, I think I wonder why, and I realized it because he would have felt. I think he would have felt ridiculous because he knew I didn't ever put it over, like in the dressing room or whatever. In the ring, of course, you're out there, you're on the stage, but in the dressing room, no. Again, I keep using it over and over again, but it's like if Paul Newman comes up and introduces himself in a private affair. He comes up and introduces himself as Butch Cassidy. You look at him like, if you see he's serious, you think he's nuts. Same thing. I thought it was interesting because we had I don't know, it wasn't like we didn't talk for an hour. We talked for a few minutes. I hadn't seen him for a while. You know what? He was very subdued too. He didn't have all that flamboyant, the body language. His body, Dusty was a good showman. He was a great talent. He had that character down, but he was always moving and bobbing and weaving. And for a guy who was built like he was, he had, man boobs. Nobody ever mentioned that. I never mentioned it before just now, but nobody's paid attention to, the guy was.
So that's exactly what I was going to say. I don't think he allowed you time to pay attention to things like that. Yeah. He was his good.
Persona, his persona was overcame all that, and now you got to hand it to him. Guy was a great talent. I mean, he was. Now, I know a lot of the guys, they liked their persona. Their persona was someone that was respected. People liked him, asked their autograph. You go back home and your real name with your family, and nobody's giving any special. They don't care about your pro wrestling, about your persona. Nobody's giving any special. Kudos because if you're like I was in the middle, 2 brothers and 2 sisters. I was in the middle. I had 2 older and 2 younger. So when we got around our parents, well, it didn't matter that I was on TV maybe that day. That didn't have any bearing on our family. Sibling rivalry had me number 3. I didn't move up to number one just because I had some fame being on television. So in real life, your persona can be a lot more accepted and important. And it's the one that's making you a lot of money. Of course, it's more important to you financially. But a lot of people, it was more important to them psychologically, too. I'm going all the way around the corner to say that to get Dusty talking about the way he did when I first met him, back when he and Murdoch came in, when I first was meeting him, he hadn't even become the Dusty Rhodes persona yet. He would talk to me like that guy. I just thought that was very unusual because it's the only time I ever saw it after he became Dusty Rhodes, the character. So I just wanted to mention that. I thought it was interesting psychologically. We'll get into it in our.
No, I get you. It's not just turning a gimmick on and off. It's just when he chooses to turn the gimmick on and off. Like maybe you did see Dusty Rhodes, the character, coming at you and talking to you for 5 days in a row, and then just randomly on this day he's just Virgil Runnels. I totally get what you're saying there. It's kind of unusual how it just would come and go. I get it. I can see how that would be kind of confusing.
I liked it, Ray. I'll shut up. I'll say this and shut up. I liked it because I felt like it was because it was just the two of us. For once, he had to relate. He didn't have to just sit back and turn on the Dusty Rhodes and have everybody bask in his glory. He had to talk to me. I think he would have felt ridiculous trying
to have a normal conversation. Yeah, right. Exactly.
As Dusty Rhodes.
Totally.
Because we're not in the ring. We're not in the arena. We're out in public. And so it was just very unusual to see him like that. That's the only time I ever saw him like that for the rest of my life. So anyway, I wanted to mention it.
So you're telling me when you got fired in 91, he come to you, Bobby Roop, you're fired, baby. That's how you.
No,
I'm just having some fun.
I know. He didn't come. I was a booker too. I would have just called the guy in if it was reversed. Yeah. Well, I just called the guy in. I'd get him booked somewhere.
I didn't mean to open this can of worms again, Bob. I apologize. So we're moving on to another fun story here that you've kind of told a little bit in the past, but it makes perfect sense to tell it again now and maybe some more detail. There's certainly more context now since we're in the middle of Mid-South. On the last TV taping, you were beat by none other than the Junkyard Dog. Well, at the very next set of TV tapings, I believe you've told the story that it was Paul Orndorff who was slated to do that. Well, actually, it was the Grappler who was slated to do the job for the Dog, but the Grappler, Len Denton, hadn't arrived yet, so the Cowboy turns to Paul Orndorff and says, Paul, you're next up. You're going to be doing the job to JYD because Bob Roop had already done it a couple weeks earlier. And I'll let you take the story from there.
Yeah, we were, again, I was up in the room upstairs. I'm down at the far end of the room. And Bill calls Grappler in there. Len Denton's not there. It's time to start the show. And they were going on early. Bill called Paul up. And he said, Paul, Len's not here. But I need you to go out there with Dog and put him over. And what do you think? What do you want to? What should we do? As Bill would give you, Bill would let you give him a finish, and if he liked it, you could go with it. That way you were involved in it, and you're probably going to do it better than if you weren't. It's your own deal, but at least he knows you have done it and you can do it. And Paul just, started shaking his head and leaned forward, put his hands on his knees. He wouldn't look at Bill. And he's sitting right next, sitting about 3 feet away from him. They're on the same bench. They were side by side. And he's going, oh, Bill. He said, oh, that'll kill me. And Bill, I was watching Bill, and Bill just looked at him for a second. Like, Paul wouldn't look at him. Bill was looking. I said, come on, Paul. He said, don't give me that. Come on. Give me an idea. I can't, Glenn's not here. We got to get the show going, Bill. Or Paul, give me an idea. What do you think? What should we do?
So he's asking Paul for an idea. How can we beat you but make you, look good? How do you want to get beat, basically? Yes. So he's giving him an opportunity to speak up. And I see where Bill's going. Let's see where Paul goes with this.
To flesh that out a little bit, if you're a heel and you're getting beat every night, all the ways you can get beat to the ones where you get sucked dry, you might as well retire from wrestling if you don't get some heat back, or it doesn't hurt you. In fact, you get beat, but you have even more heat, even though you got beat. So you have all those variables that you should have them in your repertoire if someone asks you. Jody Hamilton was booking in Florida when Orton and I were in there together, or he would always ask us for finishes for our match, or ask me. Well, Bobby contributed too. Bobby and I would talk about it in the car all the way to the show. And Jody was asked for a fetish, we'd give it to him, and 9 times out of 10, he went with it. So if they're going to ask you, well, anyway, Bill asked Paul, and Paul just said, "Oh, Bill, it's going to kill me," and all that. And Bill asked him 3 times, and he finally said, "Well, Bobby, I'm not the far in the room." Said, "Bobby, you worked with him, Paul. You worked with Dog last week, or you work with him again?" I said, "Of course." And so he said, "All right, go ahead and get dressed." And about that time, Paul went to get up to leave, and as he reached for the door opened, and in walked Glenn Denton.
I love that part of the story because Paul basically outed himself, and he didn't even have to.
Yeah, in walks Len, and Len's dressed. He's got his boots and his tights on, and he didn't have his hood on because he didn't need to, but he was ready. He said, "Sorry, Bill, I had a car problem or whatever." And then Bill told me later, I'm not sure how much later, but he told me, he said, one of you guys going to have one of you guys go out because he had somebody coming in, I think, a new heel, single heel. He said, I was going to keep Paul and let you go. It's an extra month. He said, but I decided to keep you and let Paul go. And so he turned Paul babyface because I was working against Paul by the time before he left.
Right.
But I was watching a show today, a Mid-South show today before we got together. And he's talking about Paul Orndorff. And this is after Paul has done his Bill and kind of refused to do the job. He's talking to the ring announcer, or he's color commentator on the show. And Bill Watts says, yeah. He said, Paul Orndorff never beat Ted Dibiase. Now, Bob Roop, with help, Bob Roop did beat Dibiase. And when I heard that, I had never seen any of this stuff before. When I saw that, I thought, that's all from that thing up there in the
a cowboy never forgets.
Yeah. Right. He was saying, well, why not get as much as you can out of a guy? Paul did have stature, but to be able to say that, okay, Paul, the good guy, great guy, great talent that he is, he never could beat Ted DiBiase, but Bob Roop could, and that way he uses Paul's stature, which Bill is the one that put that.
And when you don't know the backstage, your little piece of the puzzle makes that comment make so much more sense, because as I listened to that back in the day, I often wondered, why is Bill Watts burying Paul Orndorff but putting Roop over? Because that's unnatural. You're both heels. So he should have been burying both of you. Paul Orndorff's never beat DiBiase, and Bob Roop needed help to beat DiBiase. Instead, he's like, but Roop did beat DiBiase. So yeah, it all makes sense now. And it's all because you've told this story now that we know. And to summarize real quickly, the last TV taping 2 weeks prior, Dog beat you, no problem. This TV taping, Dog's supposed to go over on the Grappler, who is a no-show at this point in time, his car issues or whatever. And so Bill's got to look around and make a decision. Paul, Roop already did the jobs. We don't need to do a repeat of that. So let's do Dog over Orndorff. What do you want to do? I can't do it, Paul. I just can't do it. It'll kill my heat. Or Bill. Yeah. And so Bill tries and tries. He's not getting anywhere. So he looks over and says, Bob, I'm sorry, but you're going to do the job again. How do you want to do it? And you're like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. Because you have faith in the booking, you know where everything's going. Then, as you say, Paul goes to leave the room. In walks the Grappler. He's going to actually wind up on this episode doing the job to JYD. Everybody can go watch it the first week of March television in '82. And it's funny to know all of this was going on behind the scenes, because as wrestling fans, all we see is JYD versus the Grappler in the ring. But there was this whole mess of nonsense going on backstage, and Paul screws himself basically, because he was going to stay, I believe, 6 weeks longer. I believe he winds up leaving 6 weeks prior to you. So those time frames were likely flip-flopped because of this situation here. Yeah,
and real world value. I mean, not just reputation or whatever. Talking about between $6,000 and $10,000 in pay for, you're getting paid. Now, Paul goes somewhere else. He's not going to start out making main event money. Not right away, not the first few weeks. He's going to have to get over. He's not going to be probably not going to be in main event. So, he might make half of what he was making at Mid-South. So he screwed himself out of that money just by, again, he was looking back and give him a break. I said earlier, he wasn't sophisticated, which comes with experience. He wasn't experienced. But you know what? He continued to do stuff like that. And are we ever going to Are we ever going back to Atlanta, the Ole period?
We're gonna go back to everything. Anything we haven't touched on, we will definitely cover. Yeah, we're gonna go through everything with a fine-tooth comb.
Well, Paul did some of the same stuff down there.
Okay.
I already talked about one of them. I never looked at it from the angle I looked at it most recently. His deal was Tony Atlas, where he bit or pulled his ear off.
Right.
That created a serious problem for the promotion. I never gave Paul any gaff for doing that. But when I think about it, what is your problem? How could you possibly get in a fight with another wrestler, about who's tough, who's really tough? What are you talking about? Yeah, Paul was part of that. It created a lot of problems for us. Tony just disappeared. It takes two to tango, and Paul was the one that did the damage to Tony. So that's, and again, he did a lot of good things too. I mean, he drew money, and everybody that got paid, including the people who ran the building and the people put up the ring and all the people associated, the TV people, Paul contributed all to their welfare. So he did a lot of good. And the things we're talking about are things that, that were blips. Say his normal radar, his normal trajectory is a path upward and maybe in leaps and bounds or steadily upward. But there's spots where that line, that upward line, dips down. It has a spike down because some aberrant behavior of some kind, like it was Watts refusing to do the job for the dog. That's just that's crazy. It's like I'd be like refusing to do a job for Dusty. What, out of your mind? You want to beat him? Oh, don't book me with him. Oh, you're getting a chance to go against one of the top talents in the country. Even if you get beat, we're not asking you to do a squash job. Go out there and get your heat. But in the end, we want him to beat you right in the middle of the ring. But you got beat by, it's like you're working against a world champion. Talking about going with Dory Funk Jr., going 37 minutes. I don't care if he beat me with the figure four or sleeper or knocked me out or whatever. I went 37 minutes with the world champion. So that gives you some stature.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron. I'm talking about that $5 all access tier over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts for just $5, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. We also offer remastered versions of the earliest episodes of The Grenade Show covering the 1989 NWA project. Includes enhanced sound quality, plus new content and conversation never heard before. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive Watch Along series covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, Videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. And for those who like all of their podcasts in one nice, neat little pile, the WrestleCopia Patreon also offers a Patreon exclusive Spotify account. You can actually go over to your Spotify with your WrestleCopia Patreon credentials. Instead of listening or downloading directly from Patreon, you can go over to Spotify, listen to all the latest shows, including all of the early releases. And you get all of that and so much more for just $5. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come.
Okay, back at it.
Yeah, so basically we know what's going on at this TV taping here behind the scenes. You make the agreement. Yeah, I'll job the dog again. No problem. I like him and I trust your booking, Bill. You don't have to. The Grappler goes out there and JYD goes over. So not a whole lot going on that episode in regards to you guys. However, I should mention it had been Ted Dibiase and Dick Murdoch sort of in a tag team feud of sorts with you and Orndorff. Well, Dickie leaves now for New Japan to go work for Inoki, and in comes your good old buddy, Karl Kox. In his waning days as a professional wrestler, Kox going to earn one final paycheck here with the Cowboy and work a month or two here with Mid-South Wrestling. You're actually going to wind up in the ring with Karl before we finish talking today. One of Cox's last matches, perhaps.
Wow.
But we go on to the next week in March, second week of March TV, and it's Paul Orndorff and Bob Roop in the ring, and there's a dilemma going on as you are both named the top two contenders for Ted DiBiase's North American title. But only one of you can get a title shot, and that match will take place next week. However, The Office, they haven't told you which one of you it'll be yet. That doesn't sound very fair. Worse yet, the other, whoever doesn't get the title shot, will be barred from the building to guarantee no interference. As you and Orndorff, you guys call this a Mid-South conspiracy to protect people like the Dog and Ted DiBiase. You know, so I look at this, and here's the story. Orndorff and Roop, you guys are quote-unquote friends. You've had each other's backs here, but both of you want a title shot versus DiBiase next week. So the plot will thicken, and then, of course, some good booking here by Bill Watts and company later in the show. So we set the stage. One of you guys are going to get a title shot next week against DiBiase, and then we put you guys over a little bit, make you guys look good on TV here. First, Orndorff in a showcase, squashing Tony Torres early on the show, and then later on, Bob Roop taking on the Mississippi champion, Mr. Olympia, Jerry Stubbs under the mask. And I was going to ask you about Jerry this week, but maybe we'll hold off until next week because I wanted you to go back and maybe see this match first. The finish of this one with Olympia and Roop, it's going to see Paul Orndorff come ringside. But he's run off by Karl Kox, who is now replacing Dick Murdoch in the story. So Kox out now, kind of getting involved in the feud with Roop and Orndorff as well. And you're actually going to go to a time limit draw with Olympia because they're really pushing him, really building him up as, I don't want to call him the number two because DiBiase and Dog are easily the top two here, but Olympia's really getting that push to where they want him somewhere near those guys. They don't have you beat them here this week, but a time limit draw, both of you guys look good. It's a fun match for TV, very competitive. And so we get everything set up for the following week, which is going to be the title shot.
Oh, Ray, does that match with Jerry, is that on YouTube?
It is.
I didn't see it today. I'll look for it. If not, I'll text you and you can send it to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me watch the match, and next week I can talk about it.
That's awesome. Yeah, that'll be fun to talk about.
Yeah,
so we'll save the Mr. Olympia talk for next episode. But on this episode, things are going to get really interesting now, Bob. We go on to week 3 of March. Not only is it the on-screen debut of a announcer, you may have heard of his name, Jim Ross, going to make his television debut here for Mid-South Wrestling. And what a week to show up as the brand new color commentator next to Boyd Pierce. As at the top of the show, Bob Roop going to stop by. And we learned that it's Paul Orndorff, who was named a challenger for Ted Dibiase this week. But you come onto the stage here and you say, well, Paul got beat over the week by Ted Dibiase in a cage match. And you've been talking with Paul off and on the phone, and you don't think Orndorff's going to make it here today. You believe that Paul, maybe he believes he can't beat Dibiase, and you really feel that your good buddy, Paul Orndorff, he may not show up. So the man that you are, you step up and say, I'm next in line. I think I deserve to replace Paul here today. I deserve that title shot. So fun way to start the show. Yeah. Fun way to start the show there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's filthy Bob Roop. What a jerk.
So the show continues on. The episode continues on. Orndorff still hasn't arrived, but you have a match. You have a match against Killer Karl Kox right here on TV this week. Oh, my God. But before you go to the ring, you continue to plead your case with Boyd and even the brand new Jim Ross here. You shouldn't have to wrestle Karl Kox just in case Paul Orndorff doesn't show up. You got to be fresh for that North American title shot later on.
Oh, exactly. Yes.
But as Boyd would explain to you week after week here, he has no control over the booking. He has no control over the decision making. He's just a commentator. So off you go to the ring to take on old time nemesis Karl Kox here now in the Mid-South. And you're going to attack Karl, but the Killer coming right back, having none of it, delivering his brainbuster finisher and pinning you flat on your back in the middle of the ring in 2 minutes time. And I love this. Could you talk about Bill Watts giving you your heat back? We know what's coming here later in the show. But I love this because you come out there, I should be the contender. Orndorff's not here. I don't think he's going to make it in time. I don't know why I think that, but I just call it a hunch. And so I deserve the title shot. I shouldn't be in the ring with Karl Kox. Shut up, Bob, and get to the ring. Into the ring you go. I'm going to jump this guy. I'm going to jump this old guy. And they put Kox over in 2 minutes with his brainbuster, and you're just laying there. I loved it. You're laying there flat out on your back.
I love it. Yeah. You talk about best laid plans going wrong. Thank God Bill was the one laying them, not me. I was the one who just laid there. I didn't have to lay the plans. That sounds great.
It's episodic storytelling because this story starts at the beginning of the show. Now we're in the middle of the show. And then we fast forward to near the end of the show. 2 matches later, sure enough, no Paul Orndorff here in the building. So it is going to be the North American champion, Ted Dibiase, defending his title. They heard your case and they agreed with you. Bob Roop is the number 1 contender with Orndorff not here. And Bob Roop will receive that championship shot right now, right here on TV. And thanks to a referee bump late in the matchup and some interference from the one-man gang, Bob Roop going to apply a figure 4 type hold here, Bob. It wasn't exactly perfection, but I want
figure 3.
It was something. I like it. But Ted Dibiase is out cold. He was knocked out by the one-man gang. So Dibiase laying there applied in this, we'll call it the figure 3. I like that. The referee going to come to, and he's going to make the count, and Bob Roop going to score the win. And we have a brand new North American champion, Bob Roop. So brand new champion. And Jim Ross's first call at a championship win, a title change. And so we hear a very exuberant Jim Ross making the call there as Bob Roop crowned the brand new North American champion.
Wow. Now that was just a little aside here. Was this Jim Ross's first job ever?
He had worked for McGurk. He had worked for the Cowboy, but he did not do commentary for the Cowboy until now. He had done sales and some other things. I know he started off setting up rings and being a referee in the 70s. So JR had been around the business, but this was his big break. This is where Jim Ross makes his UWF Mid-South debut for the Cowboy.
Well, I see him every year at Waterloo at the Hall of Fame, but I thought I'd mention it to him, something we have in common, if it was his first color commentary gig ever.
He may have done something for McGurk, but it would have been many, many years earlier.
I'll just ask him about it this year when I go out. But I'm going to go against Dibiase after Karl Kox has flattened me.
Yes. So
wow.
Some people would say, well, I'm sitting here watching this, and if I didn't know what was coming, I'd say, man, they killed Bob Roop's heat dead. He just lost to Kox in 2 minutes with the brain buster. But they knew what was coming here. You were going to get all of your heat back and then a whole lot more by the end of the show.
Wow. That's genius. See, on Watt's part, that gets Karl Kox over. If I'm sure he'd been there before.
Oh, yeah.
But,
Kox
but even if he hadn't, that gets him over like $1 million. Because even Junkyard Dog didn't beat me in 2 minutes. I got beat, but I was a top guy. So he comes in there and beats me in 2 minutes with a brain buster, no doubt about it. That gets him over like $1 million on site. We talked a while back about Kevin Sullivan coming into California and being able to get over because he was chasing me. I had crippled his brother, and we got him over right away with that deal. But Karl coming in and getting a 2-minute squash out of me, that got him over like $1 million. And then I get all my heat back later in the match with Dibiase. Even though I'm not the one that does the damage, I'm the one that profits from it. So, yeah, it's just brilliant on Bill's part. It takes all the stature I have and puts a lot of it on Karl Kox, and then he gives it back to me later on
and then some.
with the help
the
of
new
the
champion.
dog, with the help of the
gang.
Yeah, with the help of gang, I get it all back. I don't remember doing the interviews for this, but I'm sure when I'm doing interviews, I wouldn't even mention the Karl Kox match. I would be talking about, what a triumph my match with Dibiase was.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, yeah, well, that's good stuff. And again, out there, a dear listener out there, I'm supposed to be the guy with the memory, but I have never seen. Now, I did this stuff, but I didn't know the context. Even I was doing it then. Bill wouldn't come in and say, Bob, you're going to go out there against Karl, and then you're going to go. He would say, Bob, you're going to go out there against Karl, and then when you get back, I'll go over what you're going to do later.
Wow.
So I go out there against Karl.
You're telling me you're about to be the new North American champion, and you're not informed until the middle of the TV episode?
Yeah, Bill, Bob, you're going to go out there and do a squash job for Karl Kox in 2 minutes. We're going to make you the new North American champion.
There's a rib here somewhere, right?
Oh, I like it. Yeah. Yeah, that's good stuff on Watt's part. Again,
this was very unusual. Back then, wrestling was pretty cut and dry. It was pretty black and white. And you watch this episode, though, and the story is being told over the entire duration of the show. Well, Paul's not here. Where is he? We're going to wait. And I'm not saying they had never done things like that before. Georgia had the old 4 flat tires angle with the Freebirds and Austin Idol by this point. But this is much more intricate. And I love the 4 flat tires angle. If you've never seen that, Bob, it's pretty fun. But this here is very similar in fashion, because we're going to get to that at the close of the show, because we got one more segment of this show to discuss in a second. But to start off, kind of announcing that, hey, the challenger's not here, and you kind of shit on Orndorff a little. Well, Paul lost to Dibiase all week on the house shows, and he's kind of feeling shitty about it. So I'm thinking he's not going to show up based on the conversations that we've been having. I think Paul's done. And just call it
pouting. He's a poor sport. He's pouting. You're not a good sport like me.
So, I think I should be number one contender because, I was in the running anyway. So I'll step up and I'll replace Paul should he not, appear here today. They stick you in there with Kox. Again, great storytelling, because if you're not planned to wrestle Dibiase, why wouldn't you already have another match booked? So brilliant booking there.
And I tried to get out of the match with Kox, right?
Right. You say, hey, I might have to wrestle Dibiase later. I shouldn't have to wrestle this match. They say, no, go to the ring, and you try to jump Kox, and he drops you with the brain buster, beats you flat. You're laying there just flat as a pancake. After you talked about laying there for the dog, you did the same thing for Kox here. It looked great. I loved it. I was like, he's just like selling it like he's out cold. And then, of course, we go to the main event, and there you are. You have to step in there for Paul Orndorff, who does not arrive. That is until the end of the show. We come back from the final commercial break, and at the close of the show, Paul Orndorff finally arrives in his street clothes. He's going to join Boyd Pierce here. He said his car wouldn't start. He couldn't get the car to start, and he has a good idea of who was involved with that. At first, he thought it had to be Ted Dibiase. Dibiase didn't want to defend his title here against Paul today. Makes sense, as Paul admits that he had the whole one-man gang run-in planned. you and Paul put together. You guys all put that together over the week, having the gang come out there to help Paul win the title. So Paul admits that here on TV as he finally arrives here to the studio, or to the Irish McNeil's Boys Club. And he says, well, he overheard that Bob Roop won the title. And what a good friend. Paul says, well, if anybody had to win it besides me, he's fine with it being Bob Roop. So Paul was happy. He was happy with that, Bob. That is until he went to the dressing room to congratulate you. And you were in the shower. And I don't think Paul was that eager to congratulate you. So he's letting you go take a shower. And meanwhile, he notices something sticking out of your bag. What is that in Bob Roop's bag? It's some sort of a cable that goes underneath the hood of a car. In fact, it's the cable you need to start the car. As Paul Orndorff begins piecing everything together, putting two and two together. And as I watched this episode again to take notes for this show, my son Connor is in the room watching the show, and he loves Territory Era wrestling. But he uses some logic here, and he says, why would Bob Roop bring that cord to the show? Like, why would he bring it? And why would he have it in his bag? I said, yeah, I know. Well, it's wrestling. We gotta overlook a little bit of logic. But in general, it was a hell of a storytelling here as Orndorff puts it all together. Who had more to gain out of this, anyone on the earth, than Bob Roop? And now you've screwed your friend Paul Orndorff in order to win the title. So Paul Orndorff, not a very happy camper.
Well, why would I bring that cable in there? Yeah, that's some really good stuff. Well, Bill was already planning on a turn, and I'm so happy that it worked out that way. I would have hated to have to work as a babyface there my last 6 weeks, work against Paul as a babyface.
I think it's going to be a little longer than that. You're going to be here with Paul. Paul will leave about 6 weeks prior to. Yeah, but you got a couple months with Paul, I do believe. Plus, you had done some dastardly things just to turn heel a few months prior to this. So it made sense to go with Paul here.
Yeah, I was also a heel that would back up, but I would get out of the ring a lot and make guys chase me or whatever. That's not out and out coward. It wasn't a crybaby cannon type stuff, but Watts, I like the way Watts did commentary because he would always talk about strategy. Sometimes in strategy, in battles, in actual warfare, a retreat is the best strategy. You retreat. You're out on a wide plain. Back in the Alexander the Great days with chariots and horses, your army's getting slaughtered, and there's a big valley behind you. You position yourself there just in case you need it. You retreat to that valley, and you set up a big ambush back there, and then the other army comes and chases you in there, and you wait until they're all in the valley, and then you annihilate them from the side. So a retreat can be strategy towards being victory. Yeah, I just enjoyed working heel so much better. The idea of having to try to make babyface interviews, which I shouldn't have. I should have just talked like I was still a heel. If I had been babyface.
I think, to Paul's credit, I think he kind of plays that gimmick too. When he turns babyface, he dislikes you, but I think ultimately he's still got that heel persona about him, because I never got that vibe that Paul was 100% baby after this turn here.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I mean, I don't think people mind having two heels beat the crap out of each other.
No, I'm sure they get to pick who they like better. Do they like the technical wrestler Bob Roop? Do they like the good-looking, muscle-bound Paul Orndorff? I don't call him muscle-bound, but muscular Paul Orndorff.
Muscular, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, who they hate least.
Yes.
We don't like either one of them, but right. We hate that one guy. I hope we hate that badass Bob Roop a lot more than we hate that nice-looking Paul Orndorff. Always tan, nice hair. I was balding. I'm seeing these tapes, and there's that softball-sized area in the back of my head.
Is that why you refused to watch yourself back then? I don't want to see it. A
lot lighter than all the hair around it. So, yeah.
Well, you're the brand new North American champion, man. That's a hell of a, that's for those who don't know, that is the equivalent to, say, the world title or whatever in regards to the Cowboys territory, because that is the top title in the territory, the North American champion. And you beat, well, he's not JYD, but Dibiase is the 1B. We'll call him the second top babyface. He's used basically interchangeably here with the dog as in regards to the main events go. And Dibiase, no longer the champion, Bob Roop the champion. So no doubt Dibiase, he has a quarrel with you. he's got a squabble. He's going to want his belt back because you used the help of the one-man gang to steal it from him. So not only is DiBiase going to be coming after you, but now your one-time good buddy, probably not any longer, Paul Orndorff, going to find a starting cable in your bag. And I believe he found a copy of his car key in there, too. I think there's some illegalities about all of this, Bob. You should probably have done some jail time for this, but it's wrestling, so we can do whatever we want.
Oh, yeah. Years later, we did a deal in Orlando. I was booking it. I had Luger. I was trying to build him. I had Luger and Barry Windham in Orlando. I couldn't think of a finish. So I did a deal where I had Luger take off and Barry chased him. Orlando had a big building, had a big, like a ice skating rink type floor, and the ring was down on one end of the building. The seats only went back. They had a lot of bleacher seats, but the ringside seats, there was like 30 or 40 yards of open area.
Right.
And that I drove my Cadillac in there, and we took Barry, we got him down, threw him in the trunk, and took off with him. Yeah.
How many calls to the local police for that one?
Yeah, exactly. Kidnapping, just stuff you absolutely can't do. We did it. Now, I didn't know about the 4-flat tire thing, and I was thinking, now in retrospect, I look back and think, well, that's pretty progressive. Oh, later on with the WWE and WWF, they did 3/4 of their stuff was not in the ring. It was out somewhere and in the world somewhere. Things are going on, people's bedrooms, stuff. I still remember I hadn't watched TV for years of wrestling. I happened to be watching WWE one time, and Dusty's son, Dustin, he and his wife had split up or something.
Yes.
And he was, I don't know if you remember this one, I was absolutely astonished that they could get away with this kind of thing. And there was a heel, and they were doing a heel interview. Now, earlier in the show, Dustin got on there, and he made an interview about, honey, I know we had our problems, but if you could come back, I miss you, I love you, darling, I'm so, And then the guy, and it's a heel, and he's in bed, and he's got blankets
the porn star. Hello, ladies.
He had blankets up to about his top, right below his chest. And he does this interview. And at the end of the interview, he lifts up the blanket. And there's Dustin's wife. As comes her head, peeks up. She's been under the blanket doing something.
Yeah.
Her head
I remember that.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. That one and the David Schultz and the little kid in the cabin thing.
Oh, that was a fun one. That was ahead of its time, really.
Oh my God! I'm talking an experienced booker who's done everything. I thought I could, nothing that could shock me or just make me go, oh my God. But those two, I thought, holy crap! Oh man, these guys are great. Yeah. So. There was definitely money to be made with the David Schultz character. I think longer than he lasts there. Of course, there's two different stories to that. We won't get into all of that today as to why David actually left with that whole Stossel thing. He says that Vince told him to do it, and the WWF says that he did that on his own. So it is what it is. Stossel got some pay out of it anyway at the end of the day. But David Schultz is quite the character inside and outside the ring. Bounty hunter for many decades. Is he still alive?
Yeah, he's still hanging out there somewhere.
See if I can talk to him sometime.
Yeah, he did one of those, I don't know if it was a dark side. It was when they were doing the territory deal. I think he was part of the Stampede one.
Oh, good.
You were part of the Florida one, right? In fact, I don't want to get completely off topic here, but I believe you're once again a TV celebrity now, Bob. I just heard that you were on the most recent edition of Dark Side of the Ring when they were covering the old Black Saturday, where Vince McMahon took over the Georgia territory. So congratulations for appearing once again on TV in 2024.
Well, thank you. I think that's the second one with Vice, which is nice. The first one we did was with Sullivan, Brian Blair, Jerry Briscoe, Steve Kern, and myself, and we did the territories.
Yeah.
And we did championship wrestling for Florida. This one was about when I was working with Ole, and you and I talked about the Saturday night takeover. But one of the things I remember, now this interview was different. It was just me. If you were looking at the screen, that's pretty gruesome. Basically, all you see was like my head and then maybe 6 inches of screen on each side of it. It's interesting to do an interview where the camera's about 2 feet away. I do remember one of the things you were talking about was Vince McMahon came up and they asked me a question about what I thought about his overall philosophy, behavior, whatever, and, the fact that he was a billionaire from what he had done. And I just made the comment of what good is money if you sell your soul? And, it's not original. I read that, probably 70 years ago, many times since then, but it's true. I always curious why multimillionaires commit suicide. You think you're rich as you can be. What would cause you to devalue your own life so much that you would take it? Afterwards, I thought, I made this a year and a half or so ago on after that one we're talking about. And I thought, is that too strong? Am I being too? And then the last thing about McMahon came out, about that girl and
Sure.
what I don't want to get into it, but what he was doing was just so basically subhuman, just so out of bounds and so obscene, so offensive. And I don't care how much money you got, you shouldn't be allowed to get away with doing that kind of crap. I felt justified in my comment about what good is money and there's some other things too. I read Jimmy Dillon's book about him working up there and
Talking about JJ?
JJ, yeah. Vince set him up, had him made him feel secure, had him buy $250,000, $500,000 house, and then fired him. And Jim ended up 6 months later sleeping in his mother's garage, and he lost his family, and McMahon basically just screwed him. He could, so he did, and so I hear that kind of stuff, and I think, well, there's a guy's a real butthead, really, frankly, and I never wanted to work for him after the deal with Ole. Volkov went, a couple other guys who were working for us went, Sheik maybe, and I didn't have a problem with them doing that. But I was never interested. Now, I'm not saying he would have been interested in having me, but I wasn't interested in it at all. What I saw of Vince Jr., I didn't like. Let's put it that way.
Well, they weren't WWF talents, the guys that did go, so they weren't used very well. Most of them, they were basically used to fill out the Georgia TV stuff that Vince had taken over, and they were working in the undercard, really doing jobs mostly. Even Wrestling 2 was there. He went over, and he was on the losing end for a little bit. That was kind of a weird fit.
Wow.
Don Jardine, the spoiler, and he did get a couple wins, though. You got a guy that size, you got to push him a little bit. But Les Thornton went, but he was strictly enhancement. But Vince would use him on and off to help train some of the guys that he saw potential in, But, those were some of the guys that did go.
I was always curious if McMahon had a vindictive streak. I mentioned this before. I felt like he did. He took some of the former champions, Dusty the Polka Dots and Harley with the crown and the robe and all that.
Dory wasn't even allowed to use his own name. He was Hoss Funk. He had to give him a name from Bonanza. He was Hoss Funk.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you talking about Dory Jr.?
Yes.
I didn't know he worked up there.
Yeah, Terry and Dory came in 85. They worked there for a little while. Then Terry, you ever hear the story about the sick horse?
Yes.
Okay.
I read his book.
That's how Terry left. Then
no, I read it. Mick Foley's book. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but Terry leaves, and then Dory's stuck with. That's kind of a good segue too, because you had mentioned this off air, and I think the match already happened. I think we already talked about your matches. With Jesse Barr, he comes in and replaces Terry in the WWF as a crazy funk cousin with a mask, a Lone Ranger mask. He was crazy. Jimmy Jack Funk. But here back in 1982, he was Jesse Barr, and you talked about watching a match that you had with Barr around this time. Do you have any memories of that, or do you want to comment on that match or Jesse Barr?
I had. If you'd asked me if I ever worked with Jesse, I would have said no. I didn't remember it. But I saw the match today. I was looking at stuff this morning. Mm-hmm. And I told you I did some homework last night and again this morning. I feel like matches I'm in, I should at least be able to say something about those. But, again, 45 years ago, Jesse and I had a really good match. And because there was a lot of amateur style wrestling in it, but the amateur that kind of converts into pro type moves.
Right.
It was like a back and forth sort of. And the only other time I ever did that was Bobby Jr. and I took on Jack and Jerry Briscoe in Sarasota where Coach John Heath was a promoter. Coach was a wrestling coach as well as a pro wrestler, and he had coached a lot of the guys. But we did it just kind of as a treat for him. And we just, it was like a spot show. They went there every 6 weeks or so. The Briscoes were both amateur wrestlers, and Bobby had some, and I, of course, had some. And so we did some takedown. We did some amateur type stuff. And I don't remember ever doing that, even with Lou Fez or anybody else who was an amateur wrestler. I don't remember doing any of that. And then I see this match with Jesse, and we do a lot of that. Now, let's segue forward to I'm booking in Florida. After Ole, after
Georgia.
After Georgia, I'm down there. I go down there as Meha Singh. Kevin ends up screwing himself out of the booking job, and I end up getting it. And so Jesse's one of my main heels. And I'm building him, and Luger's one of my main baby faces. Now, at that time, Crockett was taking a lot of talent.
Right.
And that's right, Dusty was booking, because he ended up taking Barry from me. I had Jesse, and there was also WWE. Well, I was building Jesse, and he was a decent heel. He was a good heel, and very good, as a matter of fact. He wasn't great big, but he was good talent, good interviews, and he could get heat. One day he called me. He said, and this was critical, because every guy was critical. We didn't have time to get new people over.
Right.
Or just lose somebody, a main guy. He called and said, I got a call from actually Terry Funk. He said, call me, and Vince McMahon wants to hire me. And I said, well, okay. He said he's offering me $5,000 a week. And I said, well, I can't match that. He said, well, here's the thing, Bob. He says he wants me to start tomorrow. So no 2-week notice.
Right.
So, what are you going to say? I said, well, much as I don't like it, I said, I understand. That's one of those opportunities. I can't match the money. So I certainly can't tell you to. And he was asking me. I think he would have gone anyway, but I didn't ask him, well, if I asked you to stay, would you? I just said, well, what can I say, Jesse? I told him, I said, hey, mention my name when you're up there. He went up there, and he was Jerry Jack Funk or whatever it was. I had the opportunity to book him for, 6 months, 8 months in Florida.
Yeah, I know he was working with Luger right before he left there. So that was pretty high up the card. Yeah. Yeah,
well, he was good talent. I mean, he had matured by this time. He was more experienced, and I think he grew up in the business. Didn't he was his father a promoter?
Sandy Barr, out of Portland. He always worked in the office. He was a referee, promoted later on as well, yeah.
And again, a good guy, no trouble, no problem, no ego. He was certainly he knew a move called a Granby roll, which we used in our match, the one I'm talking about on TV. And Watts happened to know the name of it. He was Bill was doing the color commentary, so he knew the name of it. Yeah, which was good, because I never did it in a match. I never saw anybody else do it.
That's cool.
And so it's kind of nice. Well, it sticks out. I was saying to myself, Bob, you need to get a way to get these matches and put them somewhere where you have them forever for your relative, your descendants. 100 years from now, you can say, well, your great grandfather was a wrestler, and here's some of the stuff he did.
Right.
But that's a match that I'm happy with and proud of with Jesse there at Mid-South. Yeah, it's a good booking. And you know what? We had a couple holes where in the first, here's what a good amateur he was. In the first 2 minutes of the match, 3 different times, he countered me with a hold, not like a pro hold, like a small package, but like an amateur type hold, like a cradle, and that Granby roll where he had me on my back and the referee's counting, and I got to get a shoulder up in the first 2 minutes of the match. He did it like 3 times.
Right.
The reason I'm even saying that is that when I beat him, I beat somebody. And that was nice that he was able to, and also I had that amateur background too, and he's out wrestling me. So I've got 2 or 3 different reasons to be pissed off and embarrassed.
Right.
So it was a good match. Yeah, that was a good one.
Very underrated, Jesse Barr. He was just a a big fish in a very large pond by the time he got up to Vince. And after the newness of the silly, crazy funk gimmick wore off, he was kind of just used as an upper tier enhancement level guy there until the wheels fell off. Although he was his own worst enemy. He got into some shenanigans behind the scenes. Wound up getting his eye pulled out. Lost an eye to King Tonga, Haku. Yeah. Messed with the wrong person.
Oh, man. I'm sorry to hear that. How long did... Do you know how long he stayed? How long he had?
Let's see. He came. Well, how long was he with Vince? A couple of years.
Yeah,
worked there a couple of years.
Well, he made $500,000.
Well, I mean, he was on the underneath. I don't know what they were getting paid, but he certainly made some money. There's no doubt about that.
He said he was getting $5,000 a week.
Wrestlers say a lot of things. I don't know what he got paid.
Well, he was coming in to do the deal with the Funks, that he was going to be up there with them, and he could have been justified. That $5,000 might have been justified. I don't know why Jesse would have lied. Maybe he did, or exaggerated, or maybe he's saying maybe that was what the offer was. I don't know, but I hope he did get it.
Yeah.
That way, because if he made $500,000 in 2 years, he made more money in 2 years than I made my whole career, or maybe close. But in my day, $50,000 a year was a good year for the territory years. Sure. And that was a couple 100,000 miles a year. And now, if you were the champion, if you were the NWA champion, you'd make a couple $100,000. But you were a slave for however long you had to develop. You were never home. You were always on the road.
Right.
Always hotel, motel. It's not glamorous at all. The bird in the gilded cage, staying in penthouse suites and eating the best food you can eat, but you're away from your family. You're away from you. Right. You don't have any control of your life. Yeah. Well, there's guys that do it right, like Bill Eadie, for example. Bill, he was doing something else to make a living before he got into wrestling, but he saw a way to make some serious money. And like, instead of a 50-year career doing whatever he was doing, to get into wrestling for 10, 15, 20 years and make some serious money, and also to have more time at home. And that was what he was able to do for most of his career, I think. And he was, he wasn't a party guy. He wasn't out in the bars after the shows. He was all. He had the best of both worlds. Stan Hansen's another one. The business doesn't have to cripple you or mess up your life. Now it can. There's a lot of temptations out there. You have people offering you all kinds of things for free just to be around you. Mm-hmm. Drugs and women and booze and whatever. But you know what? I'm looking at the good things you can get out of that situation. There's a lot of them. I'm proud to. You said last week about Stan and Ron Simmons saying hi. I think I'll get a chance to see those guys at least a few months. Waterloo is the first one I'd be going to, I think. But that's nice. To have the good memories. We have the guys that made it are still around. When we get together, we can trot out the stories.
A little bit ago, you were just talking about the storytelling and whatnot. And that'll take us back here to Mid-South now, as we're going to get close to the end of the show. We got a couple things to touch on still this week. But we go on. So the storytelling last week was amazing. From the beginning to the end, Paul Orndorff shows up. He figures it out. He sees a piece of his car inside your gym bag. Instead of waiting for you or rushing into the shower and beating the crap out of you, he decides he's going to go on TV to let everybody else know. But that's another story for another day. What happens, though, is the following week, we open up the show with Paul Orndorff standing in the ring, cutting yet another promo on Bob Roop. Boy, does he give it to you here, Bob. And later in the show, you take on Buddy Landell, the new North American champion, Bob Roop, taking it to Buddy, going over there. But it's Paul Orndorff, not going to stand idly by and allow you to just get away with what you did last week. Orndorff attacks, and the brawl is on. So we follow up last week, Orndorff basically finding out at the end of the show, and just like any other good TV show, the next week, we continue the story. And the story is Paul wants some revenge. He wants at your ass, and he gets a piece of it here on TV this week. Everybody was waiting a week to see what was going to happen. The booking did not disappoint. We get the brawl here between Bob Roop and Paul Orndorff, former friends.
Wow. Well, that Paul, you just can't trust the guy. You had to watch him.
Oh, yeah.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. He's the victim here, isn't he? But Well, it's my story. I can tell any way I want to, but yeah, it's good stuff. Bill certainly got the most out of his talent. And again, I've beaten a dead horse here maybe, but the fact that I think I saw the Junkyard Dog get beat on TV. I think.
Well, the dog had lost, sure.
Yeah, maybe not Penn, but
well, he'll get pinned later here this year, but that's when they turn DiBiase heel. They'll have him turn on Dog. Yeah.
Yeah, but everybody's fair game to go out there and you get beat, and then like you said earlier in the today's issue that I get brain busted by Karl Kox. That finish move he's got is just fantastic. Anybody can lay down, lay there like you're knocked out on that one. It looks like you and he and everything in the ring falls right on your face.
And what's fun about seeing Kox come through here? He's really just filling in he's literally Dick Murdoch. Right. In the story, Murdoch leaves for Japan and Kox fills in. He's basically doing exactly what Murdoch would have done. But it's fun knowing your history with Karl, and you've talked about him and how he put you over when he was leaving Crockett and all these good things. And it's so fun to see you in the ring with him here, even if it was just for a couple minutes, kind of returning the favors, so to speak, to get Karl back in action really hot and quick, as the old man hasn't lost a step. And I shouldn't call him an old man because his son's lurking around Twitter somewhere. Hopefully we'll get him on a show here sooner or later. But
that'd be good.
But Karl Kox is back, as we've seen. This is his last hurrah. He's really just here to kind of fill out Dick Murdoch's dates. After this, we talked about Karl going into working as I believe it was like a corrections officer or something along those lines. And he's going to do that. If he hasn't started that job already, it's coming very shortly here, because this is the last couple months of the Killer's career. And it's right here in the Mid-South.
I'll tell you what he did. He was working for in a jail or a prison. And what would happen is when they had a problem with the inmates, like not a riot, but a sit-down strike or some problem, where there was a problem, they would bring Karl in, and he would come in and people would recognize him, and he would talk to whoever it was. He would get alone with whoever the ringleader or the problem was, and he'd talk to him, hey, brother, this, whatever. And if they changed their attitude, then the problem was solved. If they didn't, he beat the shit out of them, and the problem was solved. So yeah, that's what he did.
Problem solver, Karl Kox.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah. And I'm not a bit surprised. Karl was a tough cookie, man. Mm-hmm. I mean, he wasn't a bully, but I think he liked smacking people if they had it coming. So he wasn't some Barney Fife just sucking on a corn shuck and walking around just some kind of a showboat. He was a very effective guy, and we tried for years. We tried to get Karl to come to reunions and things. Scott Teal had a very nice home down near Nashville. We tried to get Karl to come a few times. It wasn't that far, but he never would, and he wasn't nasty about it. He wasn't interested, I guess. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a guy that's a lot of fond memories of Karl. Very, very nice guy, very supportive. For a young guy in his career, and fun guy too. He always laughing with Karl. Yeah.
It's fun that he makes the trip back here, because I'm looking and he's not here more than maybe at best 6 weeks, and then he's officially retired from the wrestling business. So this is basically the end of Karl Kox's career, and it's kind of fun to see it here happening as Bob Roop's in the territory. I'm sure you didn't realize that at the time. You weren't really paying attention to other people's careers and whatnot, but it's kind of interesting that it happens right here. Karl Kox in and Karl Kox going to be out in just a few weeks' time. We're going to close out the show here by looking at just a couple quick matches at the beginning of April TV, the first couple weeks of April. You score a couple nice solid wins over some underneath guys, but a level above enhancement, I would say here. Names including Jesse Barr. Here it is. Here's another win over Jesse Barr on TV. And then you're not going to use your shoulder breaker. Instead, you change up things here, dropping Jesse throat first across the top rope, and then delivering the big leg drop, brother. Right. So I guess that's where the Hulkster stole it from, Bob Roop going over. You're kind of changing things up here as champion now. You're not just relying on the shoulder breaker, because you beat Jesse with that kind of stun gun and leg drop type finish, but also you wrestle a guy by the name of Coco Samoa, who was a fairly decent talent in his own right, and you catch him. He's coming off the top or off the middle rope with a reverse crossbody, and you turn it into this awesome belly-to-belly suplex. Just an awesome finish for the matchup here, scoring a win over first Jesse Barr and then also Coco Samoa. Any memories, or did you happen to catch the Coco Samoa match?
Yeah, I did earlier, or about an hour before we got together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I never was anywhere private with him. I don't even remember ever being in the same dressing room. Now, maybe we were in Australia, but he was there at the same time. We didn't have a chance, or for some reason. I liked the match. I saw it. He was very good.
Mm-hmm.
He had some stuff that he did, gymnastic type stuff.
Right.
That was very interesting, and it was a contest. It was good. It wasn't just like going out there and the match with the match with Buddy Landell was okay. Buddy, I didn't just squash him. He had some things. He got a little bit. So yeah, those were I enjoyed those matches. I like the one with Jesse Barr better because it was more competitive.
Mm-hmm.
You can't ask guys that don't know how to do amateur wrestling. You can't ask them to do that. Except for like the English boys, a lot of the guys don't do a lot of in and out of holds, like quick, back
Sure.
and forth, back and forth.
Right.
Don't have that style, so they just don't have the training to do it. So that was fun. That was nice. But yeah,
they're giving some fun, credible matches here on not necessarily North American challenger caliber opponents, but at the same time, definitely guys that know how to go in there and have a decent match. And you come in here, Coco Samoa, you talked about Buddy Landell, of course, Jesse Barr. So it's fun watching you kind of get in there and still showcase you. Even though you're the top champion, you're coming out here every week on TV, reminding everybody why you are the champion, putting guys away in different styles every week, which is also kind of unique to see you use the belly-to-belly, the leg drop, and of course, the shoulder breaker, the high knee. And we'll wrap it up there in the middle of April this week, Bob, because things are going to pick back up. Lots of fun stuff. You're feuding with Paul Orndorff now. And next episode, we're going to talk about Karl Kox. He's going to be departing. So Dick Murdoch returning. We'll talk about a match that you had with Dick Murdoch on TV. You're also going to team up with Tully Blanchard for a show here on television as well. I'll have to send you the link if you can't find that one. It's kind of fun to see Bob Roop teaming with Tully Blanchard here in a matchup against Buddy Landell and Coco Samoa for television. Wow. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
Terry Canova, a great listener of ours. Don't worry, we're going to share your story next week as well because it's on the horizon. A matchup that he went and saw himself in New Orleans on May the 1st, 1982, between the North American champion Bob Roop and Paul Orndorff, a taped fist match. Mr. Canova, we're going to share your stories and memories of that one. I love it as I've read it a couple times now, and I think you're going to like it too, Bob. And we're going to talk about that and everything else that transpires, your feud with your ongoing feud with Paul Orndorff. And I guess we'll discuss how you lose the belt, as I have a good feeling that we're going to finish out Mid-South here next week on the program.
Wow. Well, this is number 3. Well, we'll see if we finish next week.
Yeah, everybody's having a fun time listening to these stories.
Well,
they can relate with a lot of the names. A lot of these guys made it big in the 80s, and a lot of people remember these names. And a lot of this exists. All these TV episodes that we're discussing, they all exist. So whether you have the Peacock app, the NBC-owned Peacock app, you guys can go there for the WWE footage. Anybody internationally, if you have the WWE network, you can go and watch this. And truth be told, guys, it's all over YouTube as well. So you can pretty much watch it for free anytime you want. So we'll continue on your story, though, here. You got a few months left in the Mid-South territory.
Okay. Well, if you look at the talent that was there, a lot of those guys, Ted DiBiase, Orndorff, Orton Jr.,
Dog.
Jesse Barr, give me some other names.
JYD?
JYD, all went to work for McMahon. When, not everybody in the country was being hired. He was only taking top guys.
Right.
And guys that those guys, they were all there at one time in Mid-South. And all those guys were talented enough to, a few years later, be able to go and work with the one major wrestling company that was, WCW was still working too. Yeah, there's a lot of good talent there. And with Watts as a really good booker and maestro of creating issues and things. Yeah, Bob, we saw the show where you won the championship. Let's see, you had wrestled a warm-up match where you got beat left laying in 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then you went in a match where you didn't beat anybody, but the guy came out there and beat the guy for you, broke his leg, and you somehow beat him, you the rest of the time you were getting beat up, but you left there with the title. So yeah, Bob, you are really a different kind of champion here, buddy.
Well, we'll have to see how long you can hang on to that belt. Lots of, as you pointed out, lots of credible challengers, including JYD, Ted Dibiase, and of course, Paul Orndorff coming for you right now. So you have to watch out for that. And we'll talk about everything I just mentioned. We'll continue to talk about that feud with Orndorff and, of course, your departure from the territory and your loss of the North American title. All good things must come to an end eventually. But you just won it here on this episode, so we'll save the losing at least for another week, guys. As maybe if we have some time on the back burner too, I've got a couple other names that just going to throw them out here now for everybody in case they're interested. If we have time at the end of next week's episode, some other guys were in the territory you didn't really cross paths with a whole lot, but I did get a kick out of them, and I thought maybe we could talk about Paul Ellering, Brian Blair, Iron Mike Sharp. That could be fun. So
okay,
we could. Those are just some of the names that you didn't really encounter a whole lot, but they were here. So maybe a story or two just through your career with some of those guys as well. But we're going to wrap it up here this week. Another fun, almost near 2 hours of Mid-South goodness, and we'll be back with more next time around. Bob, thank you so much for bringing us the enlightenment once again.
Okay, let me add just one thing before we go. Sorry to interrupt your beautiful sign-off. We were drawing money with the things you're seeing on TV and what we're talking about. Our house shows were all good, near sellouts, or at least 80% full. All of them. You know, not just one or two, all of them. Mm-hmm. And some of them are big buildings. New Orleans had a big place. So we were doing good business. It was $100,000 a week or more. I'm not sure what the gates would have been, but we were drawing money with this stuff. So that's another, if you're getting beat up like that and you're not drawing any money, well, then it doesn't mean much, does it? But the fact that you can get beat up and still go out there and contribute, help do your part towards drawing good houses, speaks well for everybody, the promoter as well as all the talent. So I did want to add that. Mm-hmm. Your success is if you're making money, and we were making money. So anyway, thank you for today, Ray. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And thank you out there for being with us again. We do this for you. And I mean, I get a kick out of it, but I hope you do too. So onward and upward, Ray.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up here this week. Want to remind everybody to follow Bob over on Facebook.com/PoorBobRoop. You can also find me over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, check out Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. So many goodies. Join today, help pay some of the bills to keep all of the great shows here up and running, including this one right here, as we'll see you next week as we continue on and possibly conclude our trip here to the Mid-South Wrestling territory on the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop.